The rain on the kitchen window wasn't just water. It felt like tears shed by a sky that knew my secrets before I even dared to whisper them. Welcome to my confessional, another chapter in the story of hidden affairs, where the neat lines of a life blur into a chaotic masterpiece of betrayal. My husband, Daniel, sat across from me, his coffee cold and untouched, a mirror to the state of our union. His face, usually a landscape of calm, was etched with a tension that made the air thick enough to choke on. This wasn't a new tableau. Recent evenings had become a gallery of such frozen moments, his silences stretching longer, his gaze increasingly vacant, as if he were already practicing his departure from our shared life, leaving me to decipher the hieroglyphs of his unspoken discontent. I watched him, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs, searching his tightly pressed lips and distant gaze for a clue, any hint of the storm brewing beneath his placid surface. "Do you want to say something?" My voice was a thread of sound, barely disturbing the charged atmosphere. He didn't respond immediately. When his eyes finally met mine, a jolt of pure dread shot through me, a dread sharpened by the memory of last Tuesday, when he'd simply nodded through my entire account of a stressful workday, his eyes never leaving his laptop screen, not even a flicker of acknowledgement that I was speaking. This wasn't the weary silence of a man burdened by work. This was the look of a stranger, someone present in body but already leagues away in spirit. Suddenly he stood, an abrupt, unnatural movement, and walked out, the soft click of the kitchen door a gunshot in the oppressive silence. His footsteps faded, leaving me enveloped in a fog of bewilderment and a faint, lingering scent of his cologne. What had just happened? We hadn't argued. Our preceding conversation had been an exercise in banal domesticity, bills, weekend plans. Yet his departure felt like a fissure, a crack appearing in the very foundation of our life, thin and barely perceptible, but undeniably there, threatening to widen and swallow everything whole. My thoughts raced, a tangled mess of confusion. Was it stress? Daniel always absorbed the world's anxieties, but the silence he left behind felt heavier, more ominous than mere exhaustion. It felt like the collapse of something fundamental. The rain hammered against the glass, its rhythm a frantic echo of my own pulse. "It's nothing," I whispered to the empty room, my hand resting on the cold windowsill. "He'll come back. Everything will be fine." But the lie tasted like ash in my mouth. This silence was a warning. My phone lay on the counter, a silent, accusing rectangle. Part of me, the desperate part, wanted to call him, to demand an explanation. Another part, the cowardly part, recoiled, terrified of an answer that would shatter the fragile remnants of my denial. My hands trembled. This wasn't just nerves. It was raw, undiluted fear. The fear that our marriage had fractured long ago, and I, in my willful blindness, had refused to see the pieces. Minutes later, the front door opened. Daniel. He walked in, his face a mask. "I'm going to bed," he announced, his voice flat. "Early meeting." No explanation, no apology. Just a wall, erected swiftly and silently between us. I remained rooted to the spot, the silence now a suffocating presence. This was the first time I truly felt him slipping away, and my own silence, born of fear and an inability to voice the turmoil within, was my complicity. That night, sleep was a distant shore, my mind a relentless tormentor, replaying memories of a happier past against the stark canvas of our disintegrating present. What happens when the silence in a marriage becomes louder than any argument? If you've ever felt that chilling quiet descend, hit that subscribe button and join our community, because sometimes shared stories are the only light in the darkest of rooms. When Liam, Daniel's younger brother came to live with us. It was meant to be temporary. His life was a chaotic mess, job instability, a disastrous breakup, and Daniel, ever the responsible older brother, offered him refuge. I agreed, of course. How could I not? I resolved to be the gracious hostess, to offer him the semblance of peace he so desperately needed. Our quiet home soon filled with new rhythms. Liam's restless energy, the sharp cadence of his voice, a stark contrast to Daniel's measured calm. Liam was all sharp edges and unpredictable charm, an untamed quality that was both unsettling and undeniably alluring. His presence became a fixture, and then, subtly, insidiously, something else began to develop between us, a dangerous undercurrent beneath the surface of familial politeness. Fleeting glances stretched into loaded pauses, conversations ending with a shared, unspoken awareness that lingered in the air too long. One evening, Daniel ensnared by another late night at the office, Liam suggested we sit on the balcony. Wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill, we watched the stars emerge, the wind whispering secrets through the skeletal branches of the trees. "I've always loved this view," he said, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "It's peaceful, like time just stops." I nodded, though peace was the last thing I felt. My life with Daniel felt like a runaway train, hurtling towards an unknown, unwelcome destination. When had our connection started to fray? When had his gaze lost its familiar warmth, or my heart ceased its eager anticipation of his return? Liam shifted, his hand accidentally brushing mine. A tiny spark, an electric current that made my breath catch. I looked at him and he met my gaze, his eyes knowing. "Are you okay, Chloe?" he asked, his voice soft yet layered with an unspoken understanding. "Yeah," I lied. "Everything's fine." But the air between us crackled, heavy with unsaid words, with emotions I didn't dare name. And then, in the charged stillness, he leaned in. It felt inevitable, a collision course set long ago. I didn't pull away. His lips, soft and hesitant, touched mine. I recoiled, but too late, too little. A storm erupted within me, desire, fear, a dizzying weakness. What terrified me most was not the kiss itself, but how much that fleeting, forbidden contact resonated in the barren landscape of my heart. "Chloe," he began, but I cut him off, panic surging. "No, this is on me." I turned away, unable to face him, the image of Daniel, of my vows, a searing brand of guilt. This was the crack, no longer a hairline fracture, but a gaping wound. "We shouldn't," I managed, the words lost to the wind. He remained silent, his gaze steady, understanding, unbearable. It was as if he could see straight through my carefully constructed facade into the messy, conflicted core of my being. I fled, escaping to the cold sanctuary of my bedroom, my body trembling, my mind a chaotic battleground. Why? What now? The questions coiled around me, suffocating. The crack had appeared, and it was only going to grow. Life after that stolen kiss was a masterclass in deception. I moved through the familiar routines, a ghost in my own home. The secret I carried a heavy, invisible burden. Daniel, consumed by his work, remained oblivious, his presence a constant, dull ache of guilt. Our conversations were hollow shells, empty rituals performed out of habit. The house, once a haven, felt like a stage set for a tragic play. Liam. He was a constant, unnerving presence. We attempted normalcy, exchanged superficial pleasantries, but the air between us thrummed with an unspoken tension. Every shared glance was a reminder of that moment on the balcony, of the line we had irrevocably crossed. His gaze would follow me, knowing, patient, and it both thrilled and terrified me. Our stolen conversations in the quiet corners of the house, when Daniel was engrossed in a late-night conference call or had already retreated into the fortress of his study, became more frequent. Liam would find me in the kitchen, ostensibly for a glass of water, and his eyes would say more than words ever could. We'd talk about music, about books he was reading, about the frustrations of his job search, mundane topics that felt electrifyingly intimate in the charged silence of our shared secret. He had a way of looking at me, a directness mixed with a vulnerability that disarmed me, making me feel seen in a way Daniel hadn't made me feel in years. The unspoken became our language, a dangerous lexicon of lingering touches disguised as accidents, of smiles held a fraction too long, of silences pregnant with meaning. Each interaction was a delicate dance on the edge of a precipice, the thrill of the forbidden, a potent, addictive drug. What was this dangerous game we were playing, and where would it lead? If you've ever found yourself caught in a web of unspoken desires and dangerous attractions, tell me in the comments, how do you navigate such treacherous waters? Your insights might help someone else find their footing. One evening, Daniel again lost to the demands of his career. I found Liam in the kitchen. His quiet question, "How are you, Chloe?" pierced through my carefully constructed composure. No one had asked me that, truly asked, in what felt like an eternity. "Fine," I managed, a brittle smile fixed on my lips. He moved closer, his gaze intense, searching. "You know," he said, his voice a low murmur, "I often feel like an outsider here. This town, this life, it's like watching a movie, but never being part of the actual story." His vulnerability was disarming. I saw the pain in his eyes, the loneliness that mirrored my own. "Milo, Daniel," he corrected himself. "He was always the star, always in control. I was just the shadow trying to find my place." His confession resonated deeply. I too felt like a stranger in my own life, adrift in a sea of unmet expectations and unspoken resentments. An invisible bond formed between us then, woven from shared secrets and a dangerous mutual understanding. "Do you feel it too?" he pressed, his eyes holding mine. How could I deny it? He saw me, understood me, in a way Daniel hadn't in years. And that, more than any physical touch, was the true betrayal. The realization that terrified me to my core. When Daniel finally came home that night, the weariness etched onto his face, the familiar routine of our disconnected lives played out. My offer of dinner, a desperate attempt at normalcy, was met with his surprised, hesitant acceptance. As I prepared the meal, the charade felt almost unbearable. Each glance from him, each word we exchanged, was a reminder of the widening chasm between us, a chasm now secretly bridged by my illicit connection with his brother. "How's work?" I asked, the question a hollow echo. "Same as always," he replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "And you?" he countered, his gaze momentarily sharpening. I froze. How could I articulate the turmoil, the guilt, the terrifying allure of what was happening? "Fine," I lied. "Just busy." He nodded, accepting the flimsy excuse, and the conversation died, another casualty of our dying marriage. Later, alone in the cold kitchen, the silence screamed. My thoughts inevitably turned to Liam, to his understanding, his unsettling insight into my own loneliness. He no longer tried to hide his feelings. His eyes, when they met mine, were filled with a potent mix of desire and a shared, dangerous knowledge. This couldn't go back to how it was. The unspoken war between Daniel and me escalated, the silences growing colder, more charged. I sensed his suspicions, the way his gaze would linger, heavy with unspoken questions. I avoided his eyes, the guilt a constant, suffocating presence. The trust between us had eroded, replaced by an icy wall of doubt. One evening, with Daniel again working late, I found Liam in the kitchen, his expression serious. "There's something between us, Chloe," he stated, his voice soft but firm. "And you know it." The directness of his words shattered my remaining defenses. "We both know it wasn't just a random kiss," he continued, stepping closer. "You feel it just as I do." My protests were weak, my resolve crumbling. "Why is it wrong?" he challenged. "Because it doesn't fit your rules, your idea of how life should be?" His words were a scalpel, dissecting my carefully constructed denials. "This could destroy everything," I whispered. "What's left to destroy?" he countered, his voice a cold wind. "You know there's nothing left between you and Daniel." "This isn't living, Chloe. It's emptiness." He was right. The mirage of my marriage had dissolved, leaving only a barren wasteland. My fear was no match for the raw, undeniable truth he presented. The night our charade finally shattered, the air in the house was thick with an almost palpable tension. Daniel was home, a rare occurrence, but the atmosphere was anything but comforting. I was in the kitchen, Raiden, Liam beside me, his presence a familiar, dangerous hum. We were talking, the conversation a flimsy veil over the surging undercurrent of unspoken desires. He stopped behind me, his proximity sending a jolt through my system. "I can't forget," he murmured, his breath warm against my neck. "That night, Chloe, that kiss, you can't forget it either, can you?" It wasn't a question. My denial was a fragile dam against a surging flood. "It was a mistake, Liam," I managed, my voice trembling. His hand gently cupped my cheek. "It wasn't a mistake," he whispered, his eyes burning into mine. "It was what we both wanted." And then his lips found mine again, not hesitant this time, but sure, demanding. My resistance evaporated. This was no fleeting moment of weakness. This was a full-blown surrender, a shattering of all boundaries. When he pulled away, the silence that descended was deafening. "There's no going back now," he breathed, the words a final, irrevocable verdict. He was right. My life with Daniel, my marriage, my carefully constructed identity, all lay in ruins at my feet. The reckoning, when it came, was brutal and swift. The next day, an unbearable calm settled over the house, the calm before a devastating storm. I knew I had to confess, to end the torment of this double life. As Daniel sat at the kitchen table, his face etched with the familiar lines of exhaustion, I gathered my courage. "We need to talk," I began, my voice surprisingly steady. He looked up, a flicker of surprise in his weary eyes. The words I had rehearsed, the carefully crafted confession, evaporated. "It's all the stress," I heard myself saying, the lie tumbling out, a desperate, pathetic attempt to deflect, to delay the inevitable. He listened, his expression unreadable, a hint of suspicion clouding his gaze. "I understand," he said finally, his voice soft, empathetic. "I've been working too much. It's affecting both of us." His willingness to share the blame was a fresh stab of guilt. "I can take time off," he offered. "We can go somewhere." I forced a smile, the weight of his undeserved kindness crushing me. The lie had bought me a temporary reprieve, but the unspoken truth festered between us. That evening, Daniel was unexpectedly late. Liam and I were in the living room, the dim light casting long dancing shadows. The pretense was gone. The air crackled with our shared secret, our undeniable connection. His hand found mine, a silent acknowledgement of the path we had chosen. "We can't keep doing this," I whispered, the words a hollow protest. "You know you can't stop this," he replied, his voice a low, confident thrum. And he was right. My will was a casualty of this irresistible, inexplicable pull. His eyes met mine, and in that moment, the world outside ceased to exist. He leaned in, his lips claiming mine with a possessive hunger. It was a kiss of inevitability, of surrender. And then the door opened. Daniel, standing in the doorway, his face a canvas of shock, then a dawning, agonizing comprehension. The silence was absolute, a suffocating vacuum. My own gasp was trapped in my throat, a silent scream of pure terror. The casual intimacy of moments before, Liam's hand on my arm, the soft murmur of our voices, now felt like damning evidence under the harsh glare of Daniel's sudden appearance. "What is this?" His voice was a strangled whisper, raw with a pain that ripped through me. Liam and I sprang apart, the illicit moment frozen in time, the air thick with guilt. "Daniel!" Liam began, his usual composure fractured, his hand instinctively moving as if to shield me, a gesture that surely only deepened Daniel's horror. But Daniel's eyes, wide with a betrayal so profound it stole my breath, were fixed on me. You're serious?" he stammered, his voice trembling, disbelief warring with a terrible dawning certainty. "How long?" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, every fiber of my being paralyzed by the cataclysm I had unleashed. The truth, ugly and irrefutable, was laid bare. "It's exactly what I think," he bit out, his voice rising, shaking with a fury I'd never witnessed. "Do you think I'm blind? That I haven't noticed how everything's changed?" Liam stepped forward. "Daniel! You have to understand." "Understand?" Daniel exploded, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Understand that you've been sleeping with my wife." "That you've both been deceiving me?" The accusation, raw and brutal, hung in the air. "Get out!" he finally roared, his voice cold, dead. "Get out of my house!" "I don't want to see either of you again." His words were a death knell. He turned and walked away, the slam of the front door echoing the shattering of my world. The affair, born of loneliness and longing, had culminated in utter devastation. Moving to a new city with Liam was supposed to be a new beginning, a clean slate, but the shadows of our betrayal followed us, tainting everything. Our new apartment felt cold, sterile, haunted by the ghosts of the life I had destroyed. We were two lost souls, bound not by love, but by a shared corrosive guilt. The passion that had ignited between us flickered and died, smothered by unspoken resentments and the heavy weight of our past. Nights were the worst. Lying beside Liam, I'd stare at the unfamiliar ceiling, the silence amplifying the emptiness within me. He too was tormented, his gaze often distant, lost in thoughts he couldn't or wouldn't share. "This isn't right, Chloe," I finally said one bleak afternoon, the words a painful admission. "We thought we could start over, but it was a mistake." He didn't argue. His silence was a weary affirmation. "I ruined everything," I whispered, the tears finally coming. "I destroyed my life, my family." "You're not the only one to blame," he said, his voice heavy with a matching despair. "We both made mistakes that can't be fixed." Our path together had reached its inevitable desolate end. A few days later, Liam packed his bags and left, his departure as quiet and hollow as our entire ill-fated relationship. Alone in the sterile apartment, the full weight of my choices crashed down on me. I had sought an escape from a loveless marriage, and in doing so, I had systematically dismantled my entire world, leaving only ruins and a profound, unyielding emptiness. I stood at the window, a stranger in a strange city, my reflection a hollow-eyed ghost. The silence, once a symptom of a failing marriage, was now my constant, suffocating companion. a perpetual reminder of my profound, irreversible mistakes. The allure of escape, the desperate grasp for a connection I thought I'd found in Liam, had proven to be a mirage, shimmering briefly before dissolving into this desolate reality. What I had mistaken for a lifeline was merely an anchor dragging me further into the abyss. Daniel, with his flaws and his distance, had still represented a life, a commitment, a shared history I had systematically dismantled brick by painful brick. Now, stripped bare of illusions and deceptions, I was left with the stark, unbearable truth of my own making. I was on the edge of a precipice, the landscape ahead a terrifying unknown, the path behind littered with shattered dreams, and the wreckage of a life I had carelessly, irrevocably thrown away. This diary entry is a stark testament to the devastating power of choices made in moments of weakness and desperation. Where does one go from such utter desolation? Is redemption possible? Or are some betrayals too deep to ever truly heal from? If Chloe's story has moved you, if you've ever wrestled with the ghosts of past mistakes, share your reflections below. Sometimes, in the telling and the listening, we find a flicker of understanding, a path through the wreckage. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more unflinching explorations of the human heart, and share this story. Your engagement helps us continue to delve into these difficult but vital narratives.